I founded the society because actually my partner runs the UKC Psychedelic Society, which is the longest running psychedelic society in the UK, at Kent University. So he kind of inspired me to do it at Brighton originally, but I got turned down because they thought it was unethical. And then I met up with someone at Sussex who was also very interested in doing it, and we applied, and we had to stand in front of the student union board and let them know why. So why we wanted to do it basically is because it's ongoing research on psychedelics, and its profound effects on mental health, but also because my personal experience with psychedelics, I've taken magic mushrooms and LSD and various other psychoactive drugs, and I've seen that they have benefits outside of recreational use. So stemming from like a personal perspective, I would say that's why. But from an academic perspective, there's research to back up these claims. So I thought that there's something here, and it's very current. It's being discussed all over the world. So might as well. I felt inspired to hop on the bandwagon. I'm passionate about it, but because it's an alternative route to the standard medical model of treating mental health, I think that psychiatry has been split into two ways of thinking. One is a sort of more psychodynamic understanding, which has been for the most part sort of shunned for the last 50 years. And then there's the biomedical model, which is treating symptoms. And I think that that's failing people, and that psychedelic medicine has a way to sort of bring both together, that it is a neurological response, it is chemicals in the brain that need to change. However, if you don't work through or have a therapist doing this with you, basically the brain puts the person into a state where you can, the psychedelics, put people in a state where they can re-examine their mental health issues, and I don't think there's anything out there that allows for that. So I think that's really inspiring. Really not want it to ever be compared to Prozac. I think that's almost like what we're trying to avoid, because Prozac and those kind of medications have this idea of this is what's going to fix you, and I don't think any chemical changes in the brain are going to help with these things. SSRIs help many people with depression for sure, but what a lot of people have is just like a plaster effect. So we're going to pump your brain with serotonin, however you still have that childhood trauma that's coming back to haunt you. So I wouldn't say it's compared to Prozac. I would say it's going to be the new way of re-examining why we have mental health issues to begin with. So there's so many avenues you can take it. It's definitely going to shift how we treat mental health. So currently, not all universities are allowed to use it, study it. I know Imperial College, Greenwich, Johns Hopkins in America, Greenwich. I think Greenwich is studying with cannabis, but these universities have been given permission to study these drugs. I know MDMA in the States is currently in stage 3 of pharmaceutical trials, and once it passes stage 4, it will be used in therapy for treatment for things like PTSD and anxiety. So the fact that it's already made it to stage 3 is really amazing. It's showing that it's really successful. Yeah, so I think you can't just a lot of the studies that are out there that which are flawed in many regards, that universities are able to do is self-report. So they won't actually bring people in to be given psilocybin or LSD. They will rely on people who already use it, or they'll give them a program to use, for instance, for microdosing, and then they'll gather the data from self-report measures. However, Imperial College are doing actual experiments with psilocybin, LSD, and DMT, where they are giving their participants the drug with a psychologist and psychiatrist. So I think certain universities have more scope to explore and to research these drugs than other universities. From a personal standpoint, I think people should have sovereign right over their consciousness. I think that if you want to explore a drug in the privacy of your home, you should have the right to do that. I think that drugs should be legalized, because we would be able to have a better understanding of what these drugs do, how people relate to them. We'd be able to treat addiction better. We wouldn't criminalize people who have mental health issues because of drugs. So I think it would be a huge systemic change, and also again it feeds into mental health issues, because I don't think people become addicts just for the drug. It's usually trauma. So the fact that we're creating villains from people who actually need support from the system is awful. So I think legalizing drugs would be able to help us fix that problem in society. So actually, funnily enough, I know that microdosing gets a lot of limelight because it's always written about, but funnily enough, microdosing actually hasn't come up very successful in terms of helping people with mental health issues. So that could be a placebo effect that we're finding there, mainly also because the studies could be sketchy because it's self-report. However, high dosages, high of psilocybin and LSD with the psychiatrist and the psychologist have had way more profound effects on treating people's mental health issues. So they think it could be something to do with like a threshold dose, so that actually in order for it to change the sort of patterns in the brain or the behavioral patterns or thought patterns, you need to have quite a high dose. Otherwise it's sort of, it's like flirting with the brain. You might need to actually just do a high dose and work through it, because what it does is it shifts. If you want to get technical about it, there's a part of the brain that we refer to as the default mode network, which is where we hold our personalities and our belief systems and sort of habitual way of thinking in relation to ourselves and identity. And when you take something like psilocybin or magic mushrooms, it dampens down that part of the brain, the default mode network, and so your brain is firing all sorts of connection patterns to re-examine how you think of things. So all of a sudden the identity in the self is no longer part of it. It's basically giving you like a fresh canvas, which is why it helps people with mental health issues so much, because people with depression can be really stuck, and allowing them the space to sort of shake up the brain and rethink things and re-examine things gives them space to realize that they don't have to be stuck in this way of thinking. So once they come out of the trip, their brain might still go back to its habitual way of thinking. However, you've given them enough of a break to realize that there's light at the end of the tunnel, if that makes sense. Like there's something else out there. I think there's always going to be risk. I think that people who are susceptible to psychosis or have psychosis in the family should avoid psychedelics. But with that being said, people get prescribed diazepam and Xanax and all these sort of sedative drugs that are highly addictive, and LSD and most mainstream psychedelics aren't addictive at all in their nature. You don't crave a psychedelic trip. It doesn't really work that way. You might crave the effects of it, but it's not physiologically, you would never get addicted to it. Also, it's unpredictable what you're going to experience on it, so it's harder to just put a brand over that you're addicted. However, there are obviously risks. People can have psychotic episodes on psychedelics, and like I said, it is unpredictable, so you can't really tell what's going to happen. However, most studies suggest that this is down to set and setting, so how the person's feeling and what environment they're in. So I think the reason why psychedelics got such bad cred in the 60s and 70s, besides all the propaganda, was that people would take it as if they would take, another kind of drug like ecstasy or and then they're expecting the similar kind of results, or drinking alcohol. But because this drug is so sensitive to perceptual experiences, you need to really consider set and setting. So that's one of the biggest risks, I think. People just taking it, thinking it's nothing. The way that it's looking now, and from one of the people I know who are working very closely with psychedelics, is that they think psilocybin's going to be used for therapy in about 5 years. So that's really soon, actually. It's a lot sooner than a lot of people realise. And then once, in the UK at least, once it's been legalised for therapy, then we're on the right track to start legalizing other drugs for therapy, or just researching other drugs. But yeah, I think for the meantime it's just going to be used as therapy. It will be an expensive kind of therapy, because the way that it's being researched is that you will have a 4 to 5 hour trip with a psychologist next to you, so that's not going to be cheap by any means. But I think it will have dramatic effects on not just treatment of mental health, but our understanding of mental health. They are amazing in terms of opening up your mind. I would also want to let people know that they can be incredibly dangerous if treated with, if people do it not realizing what they're actually doing, or maybe not doing it with someone else who's experienced in it, I think can lead to people maybe having a psychosis or just a bad experience. I think the leaving message is definitely do your reading, read up about it, but don't just knock it from its old sort of background or its old reputation, because that's very quickly becoming outdated.